You know that classic Eiichiro Oda narrative trick, right? The one where he finally shows you something long-awaited, like the Rocks Pirates, and then casually mentions Blackbeard is Gol D Xebec's son. So you just stop noticing the tiny, crucial details, sometimes right under your nose, only to get blindsided at the end. I think that's exactly what's happening right now. For the past few chapters, I don't know about you, maybe I'm alone on this, but I cannot stop asking everyone around, is Harald truly Loki's father? There are so many small hints and insinuations. If you look closely, read between the lines, and factor in the mythological and historical roots, they might point to one of the craziest plot twists ever in One Piece. Welcome back to Poneglyph Tales, whether on YouTube or via podcasts. I'm Yos, and today we are unpacking together everything you may have missed from chapters 1152 to 1156, with a special focus on chapter 1153, The Birth of Loki. Please bear with my French accent, I'm sure you will love it, and let's dive deep into Elbaph history. C'est parti! The first thing that really struck my mind when I saw the opening panel of chapter 1153 was Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. Maybe that's just Oda's art style, but the more these kinds of memories pop up to me in recent chapters, the more it feels deliberate from the master storyteller and artist we all know Eiichiro Oda is. Pay close attention to Gol D Roger's face in chapter 1156 and tell me that you don't see Ace in there, especially in that phenomenal garp punch-in, as if the father experienced the fist of love from our favorite vice-admiral years before the King of the Pirates' son did, right? There's also that panel in chapter 1154 where we watch Loki grow from baby to teenager, and the middle stage really looked like Sabo to me, mostly the hairstyle, sure, but still. And now look at young Harald in that first panel of chapter 1153 I mentioned earlier. Personally, I clearly see a bit of Monkey D. Luffy. The Luffy-Harald comparison kept bubbling up when, on that same page, we see him as a young adult picking his nose, just like Luffy in so many comedic bits throughout the manga. There's definitely a conscious mirror between Luffy and Harald, so I decided to pay close attention after that, and you will see, it doesn't end there. But let's go back to that first thought, Ace, Sabo and Luffy popping into my mind as we watch Harald, Dory and Brogy happily wandering around as innocent children, having an imagery reminiscent of One Piece's most iconic trio of quote-unquote brothers, who are not blood-related, in a chapter about the birth of two brothers, imbued in themes of parenthood and brotherhood. Doesn't feel random to me. It feels quite intentional. What if the main brothers of the current Elbaph arc, Loki and Iðunn, aren't related by blood, just like Ace, Sabo and Luffy? I started to wonder, and there are so many details pointing that way, if you start looking, you would be surprised. I will admit some of them are a bit far-fetched, if not completely crazy, but some are literally inked on paper by Oda himself. Since that panel with the three giant children started it all for me, I looked closer at it and noticed something odd about their weapons. Dory and Brogy, as children, are using an axe and a sword, exactly as we met them in Little Garden at the beginning of the story, and still as we see them today, in Elbaph. Harald, however, as a child, seems to be using a kind of small hammer, just like Loki wields the most powerful hammer around, Ragnir, whose name clearly evokes a fusion between the Ragnarok, the end of the world, with Gungnir and Mjolnir, respectively Odin's and Thor's iconic spear and hammer. These weapons were forged by dwarves at the request of the god Loki. Ragnir is a very important clue to all of this, but we will get to it later. Anyway, you probably saw it too, but adult Harald is never depicted with a hammer. We were introduced to him holding a sword, and we saw him recently clashing with rocks with a sword as well. It's as if Oda set up a kind of little mirror between little Harald's hammer and Loki's, and then smashed it to the ground into pieces. That's weird, right? In the same way, Harald is described as a vicious child, basically sharing Loki's traits, only for them to behave completely differently as grown-ups. And in Harald's case, this change of heart, in behavior, in philosophy even, is totally due to Ida. And let me tell you, I love this new character. From her design, a smile, a strong personality, partly funny, partly serious, she cares, she's sensitive, she radiates love and joy. everything that will, sadly, be missing from Loki's childhood. When we first meet Ida, she is shown behind bars, as if she were a prisoner, enslaved by humans, forced to entertain as part of a circus. In her reveal panel, she is drawn with horns, tying her visually to Harald, Loki, and the ancient giants. We are told that she roars like thunder, braiding her implicitly with the legend of Thor, whose hammer, Mjolnir, in One Piece, kind of belongs to Loki in a way. In that moment, Oda tricks us into thinking that she is Loki's mother. Why wouldn't we think that in a chapter titled The Birth of Loki? And Harald was as fooled as we were. He blindly ravaged the kingdom of these little dolls, as he called them, to save Ida. After the rescue, Ida slaps Harald so hard, I'm not sure who would win in a slap contest between her and Nami. That comedic bit, Almighty Ida versus the King of Elbaph, echoes how Nami is Luffy's worst nightmare when she's angry at him. Another subtle and funny thread linking Harald and Luffy. As for Ida, she has no horns at all. She's not even from Elbaph, but from the South Blue, not unlike a certain Jaguar G-Soul. And she probably doesn't roar like the God of Thunder either. She was simply working to earn enough to eat and recover from her injuries after being saved. Truly saved by humans who found her adrift and cared for her. In just a few panels, Ida's personality shines. She's not joking around, and she makes it crystal clear to the king. She shows deep empathy for humans and understands not everyone is born equal in this harsh world. Her words completely change how Harald sees things. And after all, don't we say that behind a great man, there is often a great woman? For Harald, that's Ida. The King of Elbaph even surprises his own men by ordering it to help rebuild what he and his crew just destroyed. We watched the giants and Harald bond with humans, with Ida steadily encouraging more openness. Continuing the Harald-Luffy parallel, there's a panel in chapter 1153 of the King of Elbaph dancing under the moonlight, instantly recalling Luffy's dance in Skypiea and ultimately the symbolism of the sun god worshipped by the giants, Nika. And speaking of the sun, just a few panels later in the same chapter, we see Ida and Harald framed by a gorgeous sunset. Sunsets in One Piece often suggest the iconic straw hat, the sun as the crown and the sea horizon as the brim of the hat. The mirroring deepens when Harald recounts his adventure in the Ryugu Kingdom, where he met a baby prince, Neptune, a prince who would become a king and cross paths with Luffy years later on the Fishman Island. The Fishman Island arc is also where the names of Nika and Joy Boy are first written by Oda in One Piece. Harald could have shared any story, but Oda chose that one specifically. To me, that's another breadcrumb suggesting that the legendary devil fruit of Elbaph is likely the Hitorito no Mi model Nika, stolen by the government, then stolen back by Shanks, and through destiny, hidden by Luffy. In chapter 1156, Rock says he needs to get his hands on 2 devil fruits, one likely hidden in Elbaph. The first time we ever see a Hitorito no Mi, a human fruit, is on Drum Island with Chopper. Yes, that's not the Nika model, but how would anyone know when the world government hid its true nature behind the Gomu Gomu no Mi? And the first time Blackbeard, the son of Xebec, who's possibly looking for this fruit as well, is mentioned, is also during Drum Island. Coincidence? I don't think so. But this raises a big question. If Luffy ate Elbaph's royal treasure, which would in a sense explain all the mirroring with Harald, then Loki, who claims he ate the same fruit as well, didn't, and he's lying. And if he's lying about that, then more about Loki, like his origins, could also be a lie. In Norse mythology, Loki is sometimes described as the god of fire, with fire and the sun being adjacent concepts. It's easy to see why One Piece Loki might claim to be the sun god himself. But above all, the Norse Loki is a master shapeshifter, the god of mischief, of trickery, and lies. I cannot imagine Oda not drawing from that. There's that well-known tale of Loki luring the goddess Iðunn out of Asgard to offer her to Thiazi, one of the most powerful giants, an abduction that nearly caused the downfall of all the Aesir gods. Iðunn and her golden apples were the key to their immortality, or rather their eternal youth, sustained by consuming these fruits regularly. So who knows, maybe the devil fruit of Elbaph might not be the Gomu Gomu no Mi at all, but possibly Trafalgar Law's Ope Ope no Mi, whose coveted power can grant immortality just like Idunn's apples, and it would still make sense even with Xebec, Blackbeard and that first cryptic appearance of his back at Drum Island, a kingdom all about medicines, and the legendary panacea Chopper has been seeking, which kind of sounds like immortality. Immortality is also a concept currently being showcased in Elbaph through the God Knights, and apples are exactly what is being used by the Blackbeard pirates in their quest to steal devil fruits after killing their power users. So many hints, so many truths, so many lies. Elbaph is also expected to be the arc for One Piece's one and only God of Lies, God Usopp. Yes, there's still hope for Usopp to steal the show. Just wait. After all, do you remember who was holding Usopp in his hands back in Dressrosa when God Usopp literally became a thing? None other than the alleged brother of Loki, Eiichiro. And our version of Loki keeps hiding his true nature behind lies, trying to fill the hole in his own heart. But the more I wonder where Oda will spring the trap of Loki's deception to us readers, the more I think about his birth. The birth of Loki could just as well have been titled The Birth of Eiichiro, since both are showcased. Yet, they share almost nothing in common. A shocking contrast, underlined multiple times in chapter 1153, definitely not without reason. One key piece of information that gets a whole page to sink in is Harald's declaration that he intends to travel overseas frequently, implying he won't be around Elbaph much anymore. And yet, on the very next page after this bold statement, 81 years ago, in an eastern fishing village, a boy is born. Eiichiro's birth is filled with love and care. Hearts drawn all over the panels, smiles on everyone's faces. The father, present, a presence in total opposition to what Harald just declared on the prior page. Oda is clearly setting up a divergence between Eiichiro's birth and the upcoming birth of Loki. Harald, though, is conflicted. He loves his wife Ida, he loves his son Eiichiro, but Elbaph's customs, culture, and shady politics prevent him from acknowledging his family. Even the king cannot do as he wishes. We are told only pure blood can be permitted within the royal family. That's when we finally meet another woman in this chapter 1153. And since by now readers know Ida isn't Loki's mother, we immediately understand who his new character is going to be. Loki's mother, Lady Estrid. She carries the noble blood of the ancient giants, and while she seems to like the king, or as she says herself, she is fated to love him for the rest of her life, Harald, for his part, as beautiful as she may be, doesn't seem attracted at all. His love and loyalty lie with Ida. Truth be told, Estrid's introduction page is packed with secrets and foreshadowing. It really deserves its own breakdown by itself. So for now, I'm going to skip it, sorry, but stay tuned for that in the next episode of Poneglyph Tales. Right after Estrid, we meet Asura, a magnificent 8-legged horse, a gift from Estrid's family to Harald. The first thing that came to my mind when I saw this horse ties back to Estrid's secrets. So we will get to that next time. What matters most right now for our little genealogy investigation around Loki is Asura's mythological inspiration. That would be Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged mount from Norse myths and legends. Sleipnir also happens to be the offspring of none other than Loki. Final Fantasy fans know him well too, since the Odin summon often rides that horse in those fantastic games. Asura may seem like an innocent gift, but something feels wrong. Asura is presented as the horse of good fortune. Not just a horse, but the horse. That uniqueness matters and, to me at least, signals there's more than meets the eye, especially since we know only misfortune awaits Elbaph, with the so-called Loki's curse. Going back to the myths, Odin and Loki aren't just linked through Sleipnir, They are tied together much deeper. They are brothers, brothers by pact. If you remember that opening panel reminiscence we discussed earlier, that's the exact kind of brotherhood we see in One Piece, with Ace, Sabo, and Luffy, who shared a cup of sake. Now, if One Piece variant of Sleipnir, Asura, belonged to Estrid's family, it's as if Oda is scrambling the mythological order of things. The horse exists before Loki is even born, so the parental link between Loki and Sleipnir is gone. That's a first hint. And the horse isn't a gift from Loki to his quote-unquote brother Odin, which in our case would logically map to Iðunn. Instead, it's gifted from Estrid, Loki's mother, to Harald, Iðunn's father. This creates a calculated parallel between Loki and Iðunn, a second big hint that they might be brothers only by name, not by blood. In other words, just like in Norse mythology itself, or like Luffy and his brothers. And since Luffy is, in a sense, mirrored by Harald in these recent chapters, that parallel here feels even more intentional. Next, the most famous modern take on Loki is, of course, Marvel's. We know full well Oda's inspirations range widely: myths, legends, real-world cultures, and pop culture he enjoyed growing up. Disney and Dragon Ball shows up all over One Piece. So, should we consider Marvel as an influence too? In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Loki and Thor aren't biological brothers. Loki is Odin's adopted son. That's another hint supporting the idea that Iðunn and Loki are in a similar situation to their MCU counterparts. And since in One Piece, Ragnir, the Mjolnir-inspired hammer, belongs directly to Loki, it's almost as if Oda dismantles both the All-Father and God of Thunder father-to-son bond and the Marvel Thor to Loki brotherhood. Also, in the Disney Plus series Loki, we follow one of the many multiverse versions of the character, classified as variant L1130. Coincidence or not, Loki makes his first appearance in One Piece chapter 1130. And as we all know, Oda loves to play with numbers. Even more interesting is Loki's introduction in that chapter as a prisoner, tightly bound and chained to the Adam Tree, deep within the realm of the dead in Elbaph. That visual feels like a direct nod to Loki's Marvel Comics debut from October 1962. In a remote part of Asgard stands a tree, in which is imprisoned Loki, the god of mischief. Look at it from any angle, whether the inspiration leans towards Marvel, the older myths, or a blend of both, the result is the same. Loki has no true biological brother, never. One Piece could be the first mainstream fiction to do this for sure, but to me, it strongly implies Iðunn is not Loki's biological brother, and as such, Loki is not Harald's son. If you are not convinced yet, I get it, some of these points are open to heavy interpretation, but rest assured there are also clear narrative clues sitting right there in the manga panels. No deep mythology or story knowledge required, even if there is more of that coming too. We have been talking about him since the very start, and now, 63 years ago in the story, Loki of Elbaph is finally born. The narrator spotlights something critical. Loki's birth happened while Harald was overseas. This stands in complete opposition to Iðunn's birth, where Harald was present despite his earlier declaration that he would be abroad more often than not. It raises so many questions. Even if Estrid says the child's name was discussed with the king, was Harald ever around to see his queen pregnant? Given his long absences, sailing across the seas for extended periods, it's worth wondering. The absent father at the birth of his alleged true heir is suspicious in itself. Did you catch that Estrid mentioned not once, but twice, that Loki's birth could be hidden with ease? First, by suggesting to tell the king it was a stillbirth. Second, even more drastically, by claiming no child was born that day at all. If hiding Loki's existence is that straightforward, it suggests there's something more behind her pregnancy. Estrid is portrayed as arrogant, self-centered, materialistic, vicious, if not outright cruel. Her personality reflects her apparent historical namesake, Estrid of the Obotrites, a Slavic princess who married Olaf, whose last name I shall not dare to butcher with my French accent, but basically the King of Sweden at the end of the 10th century. Much like Harald's dynamic with Ida and Estrid, Olaf had his official queen, Estrid, and a mistress, Edla. And yes, if you remove the L and switch the E with an I in Edla, you get Ida's name as fast as Kizaru helped Luffy in Egghead. Olaf treated his wives equally, had children with both, and cared for all of them without distinction. But it's said that Queen Estrid of Sweden was unkind and arrogant towards her stepchildren, strongly rejecting them as if they were not Olaf's kids. It sounds familiar, you say? When you put this in perspective with what happens in One Piece, Estrid rejects her own son Loki, as though he isn't a legitimate child of the king. Possibly another point in favor of our little theory. And of course, perhaps the biggest clue of all is right in front of our eyes, the one reason behind Estrid's rejection of her newborn son, Loki's face itself and those devilish, snake-like eyes. A bit of trivia first, as those snake eyes can tie into many things. In Norse mythology, the world serpent Jormungandr is one of Loki's children, playing a key role in Ragnarok alongside his brother Fenrir and sister Hel. I honestly can't wait to see who their counterparts will be in One Piece, if any, of course. That world serpent may have inspired not just Nola, the giant snake and master of the sky we encounter in Skypiea, but also the blood-soaked serpent, which, suspiciously enough, is finally confirmed in this same chapter 1153 as what many of us have long suspected, the Red Line itself. And Loki's eyes, they might also reference Sigurd Ragnarsson, famously known as Sigurd, snake in the eye, literally. He was the son of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok, whose name might even echo Loki's hammer, Ragnir. Sigurd is considered either the same person as or a romanticized version of the Danish king Siegfried, who ruled in the 9th century. And according to some poetic Norse sagas, Sigurd, Snake in the Eye, is a descendant of none other than Odin himself. So yes, everything from our Ashura, Sleipnir, Odin, Estrid and so on little theory still lines up perfectly. But more obviously, Loki's eyes resemble neither his mother, Lady Estrid, nor his supposed father, King Harald. One might argue that his horns, however, come from Harald, but it's clearly stated that Estrid carries the blood of the ancient horn giants as well. Maybe Oda is playing us, leading us to believe the horns came from Harald. Harald, who later removes his own horns, a meaningful act that, in retrospect, creates an even greater visual and symbolic distance between him and Loki, and at the same time, it brings him closer to Iðunn, his first true son. In chapter 1154, we see a smiling baby Loki reaching for his mother only to be rejected again. When Harald holds him, there is no smile at all, as if that father-son connection simply doesn't exist. This stands in stark contrast to Iðunn's warm reactions to both parents as a baby. And to bury this in plain sight, Oda smartly places the narrator's line saying that, at only a few months old, Loki had given up on love, just over that very panel of Harald holding him. No love, no smile. Surely that's normal and can't be hinting at a false fatherhood. Yet, we have already seen Loki's true nature transpire, suggesting love still exists somewhere within him and that the narrator might be wrong. After all, he supposedly fell for Lola, Big Mom's daughter, and Charlotte, Big Mom Linlin herself, is briefly featured at the start of the very chapter where all of this unfolds. The only person who seems to raise a smile from young Loki, or at least some positive emotions, isn't Harald, it's Rox D. Xebec, as seen at the end of chapter 1155. Xebec is framed as a kind of adoptive father figure for Loki, not unlike the role Shanks plays for Luffy, filling the paternal void in his life. Meanwhile, Harald appears in several moments not truly standing up for his son, like in chapter 1156, when young Loki's boat capsizes and he nearly drowns to death, but ends up being blamed by everyone. Everyone except Ida, the only one to really stand up for him, while Harald's reaction feels a tiny bit colder. There's another detail I notice that keeps widening the gap between Harald and Loki, I don't think we have ever seen Loki interact with Harald without those bandages over his eyes. Strangely, when Loki's quote-unquote condition is explained to Harald, it's framed like a sight illness, and he doesn't even check for himself. It's enough to make you wonder if he has ever actually seen them. Rox and some of his crew may be among the only ones who have, and they have seen the real Loki, crying eyes and all, not the mask he presents to the world. And yes, I managed to sneak in a The Mask movie Easter egg into my script, one of the first pieces of fiction where I have ever heard the name Loki. When the Rox Pirates first stumble on Loki, there is a bunch of noteworthy comments. Shiki describes Loki as having one hell of a devil face. From that line alone, your mind could jump to the top of Marijoise, right into the lair of the most devilish figure in One Piece, a certain someone who almost certainly has deep ties to Elbaph's geopolitics. Or maybe your thoughts drift towards the Oni race that former Rox member Kaido belongs to. The chapter where this takes place, 1154, is titled I Can't Even Die, a chilling echo of Kaido's own existential torment. Like Loki, he too could not die. And then there's Whitebeard, saying Loki is, and I quote, too big even for a giant. These aren't just colorful descriptions in my opinion. They feel like hints that Loki's ancestry might stretch beyond the giants into something older, darker, colder. Something perhaps as cold as being frozen in ice, akin to those lost warriors giants, the shipwrights of the Galera Warhammer company, revealed in this same chapter, and who, oddly enough, fought with warhammers, much like Loki with Ragnir. One extra fun fact in chapter 1154. Ida opens a bar, effectively making her a barmaid, just like Makino back in Luffy's hometown. Makino, who mysteriously had a baby boy during the time skip, a baby who smiles when shown a photo of Luffy, and whose father is still unknown. Oda teased that it's probably that man, leading many to suspect Shanks, one of the characters with the strongest ties to Elbaph. He who lost one of his arms, just like the god Tyr lost one to the wolf Fenrir, the son of Loki. We, of course, know who fathered Elbaph's new barmaid's son, but maybe, just maybe, this is a playful misdirect meant to make us think of Loki, who almost drowned to death near Ida's bar in chapter 1156, and who has a known rivalry with Shanks. Okay, I'm totally overanalyzing things a bit too much here, you're right. But it's super fun to do, so I did it anyway. Let's get back on track more seriously though. I'm not done yet, and I've saved my strongest points for last. Remember that beautiful double-page spread closing chapter 1153? Baby Loki climbing back from the realm of the dead. It's mesmerizing, and draws our gaze away from the truth inked right beside it. First, that panel on the left, where Ida and Iðunn discuss about Loki. Once again, it highlights the polarity between the brothers. One loved by his mother, the other rejected. Iðunn speaking for himself and, in a way, for Oda, clearly states that if Loki isn't Ida's child, he can't call him little brother. If he cannot call him brother, then, in Iðunn's eyes, Loki is not Harald's son. The layout and paneling of that final page are meticulously planned by Eiichiro Oda. The conversation between Ida and Iðunn sits directly beneath a panel of Harald, struggling with the harshness of the world. Just above that lies another panel, foretelling a prophecy. One day, Harald will be slain by his own son. Let that sink in for a moment as we quickly step back into his story. Perhaps are you using a Bluetooth device right now? The name Bluetooth comes from Harald Gormson, a historical king of Denmark and Norway, nicknamed Harald Bluetooth. The Elbaph king's name likely draws inspiration from him, as well as from his predecessor Harald Greycloak, and finally from Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, who, in some stories, is loosely related to Sigurd, Snake in the Eye. These historical Haralds are steeped in tales of family betrayal and assassinations. Svein Forkbeard the son of Harald Bluetooth, rebelled, seized the throne, and exiled his own father, an act that ultimately led to Harald's death. This dovetails neatly with the prophecy of Harald and his son in One Piece. From the very start of the flashback in chapter 1152, we already know that Harald likely wasn't killed by Loki. Loki walks into the throne room to find the king already being stabbed by multiple assassins. The staging and Oda's illustration of this scene strongly evoke the famous assassination of a certain Roman emperor. Tu Quoque Mi Fili, toi aussi mon fils in French, you too my son in English. The iconic last words attributed to Julius Caesar, stabbed to death by members of the Senate, including his own son, Brutus. I'm willing to bet that the prophecy surrounding Harald's death draws directly from this historical moment, reinforcing the likelihood that it's true. In both cases, the ruler meets his end at the hands of his own son. And if you follow the page layout closely, your eye moves from the prophecy to Harald, the one destined to die, and then, not to Loki, but to Iðunn, Harald's first and perhaps only true son, the one who will kill his father and fulfill this One Piece variant of the Tu Quoque Mi Fili prophecy. Some might argue that Ida's presence alongside Iðunn contradicts the paneling's foreshadowing, but on the contrary, a character also suits well with Roman history. You see, Brutus was not really Caesar's child. The Roman emperor considered him his own son, true, hence the legendary quote, but they were not related by blood. Brutus was the child of Servilia Caepionis, a long-time mistress and one of the most influential women in Caesar's life. All this can easily be mapped to Ida's relationship with Harald and the influence she had on him and ultimately Elbaph, just as Servilia greatly impacted Rome through Caesar. And finally, Ida's own name could be the missing piece to solidify everything. We have already covered the origins of Harald and Estrid's names, and briefly noted that the name Edla comes close to Ida, that's true. Nonetheless, after digging so much in Roman history, what about Roman mythology, and by extension, Greek mythology? I'm convinced Ida's name draws from there. Greek myths are filled with stories of sons overthrowing their fathers. Odin's Greek counterpart is Zeus, and one of the most famous patricides is Zeus slaying his father Kronos, the very same legend that inspired Kratos' revenge quests in the God of War games, which, by the way, also features Loki as an only child. And yes, Eiichiro Oda owns a PlayStation 5, so who knows if he played that too. In the myth, Zeus is born of the titan Rhea in a place called Mount Ida. From Ida came Zeus, the true king of Olympus, who would slay his father. From Ida came Iðunn, the true king of Elbaph, who would slay his father. Icing on the cake, remember that impressive slap Ida gave to Harald when they first met? It totally echoed Nami's thunderous spirit. And who owns a little cloudy thunderous spirit known as Zeus in One Piece? Yes, Nami. That, my friends, is the kind of hidden foreshadowing only Oda knows how to cook. Of course, I don't think Iðunn did it willingly or even remembers it. I suspect he was compelled against his will. Let's say, by someone who can Domi Reversi you into doing whatever they want. One thing is for sure, I'm convinced more than ever that Harald was never Loki's father, that he kept this truth hidden, and that he was, in part, slain at the hands of his own son, Iðunn. On that terrible day, Loki saw everything and has shrouded the truth in lies ever since. Thank you for listening to Poneglyph Tales and indulging my wild theories. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I loved working on it. I'm Yos, and in the next episode, we will dive into the true mastermind behind the birth of Loki and Harald's death. Yes, you guessed it, Nerona Imu. If this episode sparked your curiosity, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and I will see you very soon.